students for sensible drug policy here at Oakland Community College. Today is our first event of this semester, and it is a legislative panel discussion in honor of National Expungement Week. It's the second annual National Expungement Week, but we're offer legal relief to around 77 million of Americans with convictions on their records, in hopes that we can provide the resources needed to them, such as education and jobs and
just a better life.
Yeah. So I'm Sarah Stucker. I'm president of Students for Sensible Drug Policy here at Oakland Community College.
Hi, I'm Natalie James. I'm vice president for Students for Sensible Drug Policy here at Oakland Community College.
I am Margot Brunner. I am a founding member of National Expungement Week. I am also the political director for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association.
My name is Jesse Riggs. I'm a volunteer for the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association.
Well, Jones, state representative for 11th State House District, college student. Go Blue.
Earl Brothers, cannabis entrepreneur.
So we're here today to discuss expungement and why it is important to discuss based on the restrictions that it can cause to people in their rights to education and housing, among other
Yes, so this is the second year of National Expungement Week. I founded National Expungement Week after meeting several of the other founders at the International Drug Policy Alliance Conference in Atlanta in 2017. Michelle Alexander was a keynote speaker. She is the author, of course, of The New Jim Crow. And when you hear a speech from Michelle Alexander, you don't just like want to go home and twiddle your thumbs. Like we need to get to work. And so last year was the first year, and it just happened to align really well for me because I was in the middle of the Proposal 1 campaign that was bringing adult use legalization of marijuana and hemp to the state of Michigan, and that did not include expungement. So usually when I would go to speak, especially in particular in communities of color, that was the main linchpin, that they did not want to vote for this initiative because it did not include expungement. And there was a legal reason why it could not have been included. But during that, the fact that I was having an expungement affair of my own showed that you as an individual have the capacity to affect change. It's one thing for you to have a complaint that something doesn't exist, but you do have the power to make something happen for the people that you feel are underserved. One thing about expungement is that there are 77 million Americans who need an expungement of some form, and less than 10% of people actually get that expungement. It's usually due to the cost or not knowing how to navigate the legal system in particular. But having a charge of the record can preclude you from a number of things: housing, employment, schooling, which can create a domino effect that leads to other poor healthcare outcomes, mental illness, people being displaced, etc.
So I myself am a victim of the expungement problem, and I just started sharing my story a while ago, recently. It's a story that I haven't had to share in a long time, but I'm very happy for the opportunity to do so. Back in 1994, I was convicted of delivery and manufacturing marijuana, Schedule 4. I did end up catching a conviction, a felony that had stayed on my record. Unfortunately for me, it happened right around the time of the Clinton administration's second term in office, when they were really getting hard on crime. Many of you guys may know from the last past election some of the stuff that was going on that adversely affected minorities in diverse neighborhoods, and I'm from that demographic. Now, under the administration, I lost my right to financial aid for school. The felony that would have came off on my record in 7 years naturally was no longer a possibility for me. Fortunately for me, after several years of unemployment and bouncing from job to job, I was lucky enough to find a company that was setting up shop in Monroe, my hometown. And this factory was doing cattle calls. They were taking anybody and everybody they could just to staff the facility. Fortunately for me, it was just a year into employment with the company that the UAW organized the facility, and I was able to really not have to worry about an expungement anymore. I went on for 13 years to work for the UAW as well as the company that I was in, and special thanks to Ford Vice President Rory Gamble, who was my regional director, recognized and saw something back in 2010 in me, and he really pushed me to get education and get trained in the ways of the UAW and labor. And then my friends in a lot of the AFL-CIO constituency groups, like the Coalition of Black Trade Unions, they really wanted to learn more through my experience and those stories that I had shared with them. They wanted to learn more about expungement, and they ended up being big supporters of mine as well. So that showed me that we have the opportunity to become somebody. Whether we have that expungement or not, all we need is the opportunity. The best opportunity is the expungement, because then those folks don't have to rely on the relationships they've built. They don't have to get out there, put themselves in the trenches and do a lot of dirty work. They can live their life with dignity, knowing that they served their sentence and now they're employable, they're educatable, they are members of our society. And again, I'm one of those.
I'm just happy to be here. I don't necessarily have any personal, personal experiences with the, as it regards to felonies and expungements of those, but I can have relatives, friends, colleagues, associates that, even Jesse right here. And so I'm happy to, to be on the forefront of some of this. I think when we talk about felonies, we're talking about taking away someone's access to ownership and employment. And so anything that we can do right now to give them that access and opportunity back, I'm all for it. So I'm happy to see a lot of people really coming to, creating coalitions to fight this. And I was just talking to Jesse to a second ago. I'm still kind of confused on why, we're here in the state of Michigan, especially going to medical marijuana and doing, moving towards recreational marijuana, and we still haven't accomplished, relieving people from, who are still locked up for like petty crimes and activists. So that's kind of confusing to that degree, but it really just shows you how people put profits over people a lot of times here in the state, especially when dealing with politics and government. So I'm looking forward to seeing something that shift. I'm looking forward to a change of leadership where we can actually make that a reality in the state.
Thank you. Thank you.
I believe I have enough experience for the both of us. This court system here. I'm trying to get the shortest version to have.
Just give the whole version. Like, it's only appropriate to give the whole version.
You need the whole story.
Yes.
So we were at Red Lobster. We were at Red Lobster, and I was awaiting the jury trial with the jury to come back with a verdict. And I remember having, this was lunch, Oakland County Court, Judge Warren. I remember eating the butter biscuits that come with it, and I was with at the time, she was my girlfriend, but she's my wife now, and another close friend, and we're just joking. This is my first time ever getting in, going to court, facing trial. Didn't think it was going to be, all right, worst comes to worst, probation, still going, I never had nothing on my record. I was a retired stockbroker, so I actually was at JP Morgan. I was at UPS before that. I had my own credit repair business. I was just opening the gym, and then I ended up taking a college course on cannabis, because at the time I wanted to start an anti-inflammatory sports pill. I was going to market to sports. And then cannabis came up. Never smoked in college. I thought if I smoked, I would rape white people. So, I mean, I was ingrained in the reefer ban. The whole reefer ban, my parents don't do that. I was focused sport, football. So I'm sitting here at the Red Lobster and okay, we're gonna go back to this trial. And they made a joke and it was like, what is this your last meal today, Earl? What are you talking about? Whatever. We go back, and the jury came back unanimously and said guilty with possession, intent to deliver. And the judge revoked my bond right then and there, and he started putting handcuffs on me. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? I just made a joke at Red Lobster now, but I'm really about to go to jail. And he revoked my bond because there was another case that was going at the same time that had to do with a Southfield dispensary case where we got raided. Now the case I was speaking of right now in front of George Warren, I was the first person who was arrested, prosecuted, and went to jail for edibles. I'm sure you guys quote the case a lot, People vs. Carruthers. There's an actual face with that name, that is me.
Yes.
So that case went on to become a case that went to the Supreme Court and ended up changing legislation to allow edibles to be a medical use, to be used, because at the point in time, they translated the law that it was only dried flower that you could possess. Now the law did say, I mean, it was pretty damn simple. The law said dried flowers, leaves, and any mixture thereof. I mean, well, shit, if I took my dried leaves and, I mixed it in some cocoa and made some brownies, it does sound like a mixture thereof to me. But they said that, you know what, that is not a legal definition of the usable term of cannabis, and therefore you're outside of your immunity under Section 4. And at the time, there was no Section 8. There was no affirmative defense. It was like, you know what, either you are immune or you're just shit out of luck. All right, you're treated just as a normal drug dealer. And they ended up counting every single weight of edibles against me. As if you took crack and mixed it with baby powder, and they counted that whole thing as an illegal substance. They took the eggs, the cocoa, the Betty Crocker mix, they took everything. So I was allowed to legally carry 15 ounces. I had 7 ounces of flour and 2 dozen brownies. 7 ounces of flour, 2 dozen brownies, perfectly within my legal limit. But they decided to weigh each brownie as weed. So I went from having 7 ounces to having over 70 ounces, and therefore I could not use medical marijuana as a defense. And I was like, that's it. And they kept giving me pleas. I'm not taking a plea, but what am I pleading to? Possession of brownies? Like, what am I talking about right now? So we fought the whole thing, went to trial. They said I could not use the term, I could not use the word medical marijuana at trial. Now, mind you, when I got arrested, and everything was labeled medical marijuana, I had labels on it. They ended up blacking all that out so that at the trial, the jury did not see the word medical marijuana. They only saw marijuana. And I looked just like a black drug dealer who just had marijuana, and I was just found guilty. But I did go to trial because then I would have an automatic right to appeal. At least I had if I took a plea and I couldn't appeal, I would have had to apply for that appeal, and they may or may not take it. So I took the trial, but I didn't know that I was going to go to jail, and then I didn't know that they were going to lose my paperwork while I was in jail, awaiting sentencing. Because usually it takes about 2 weeks, you get sentencing. Lost my paperwork, had to sit in jail for about 35 days. Now, mind you, I did not expect to go to jail. If I knew I was going to go, you do some cleaning up, All right, you listen, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do, everybody know. I had a gym going on at the time, grand opening happening within a week. I had a credit repair business going on at the time. I also had, I was still trading stocks and all this jazz. I mean, I just got uprooted out of my life. 33 days, and a lot of that stuff just went downhill just within a month. Missed the grand opening, gym was suffered. So I kept fighting that case to give you guys some more what happened in the case, some clipping. Kept fighting that case, and the Court of Appeals ended up making a ruling that it was the most, Levine, you may be able to explain it better than me.
I can't explain
I'm still trying to comprehend where the Court of Appeals came back down and said that, okay, we should have been able to have an affirmative defense. Affirmative defense meaning that even though I wasn't immune from arrest, I was still able to defend myself and as to why I was over my limit. For example, all right, you can carry 2.5 ounces, but if I have 4 ounces, you should have an ability to defend yourself. Now, it costs a lot of money to do that, to be able to say, wow, I have 4 ounces versus 2.5, but they said I couldn't even have that at all. The Court of Appeals said, no, he could go back and explain why you're over your limit. For example, you have 4 ounces, maybe you juice, or maybe you just smoke that much more than an average person that does not smoke. So you have to just be able to prove 3 things. You have to prove that it was a reasonable amount for you. You had to prove that you had a bona fide relationship with the doctor. You didn't just go on Skype or something like that and somebody just signed something. You actually had a relationship. And you have to prove that it was for medical use. Okay, those are 3 things you have to prove. And I would have been able to prove that I have these brownies because some of my patients do not want to smoke. We eat it, therefore, let me go. Okay, but that didn't happen. But the Court of Appeals said I should have been able to go back, have that argument. But at the same time, they said that the only form that you can use medical cannabis was in a smokable form. So it's just like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I get to go back to Oakland County, have a new trial, but yet if I go back and have a new trial and don't take this to the Supreme Court, then their ruling became case law for the entire marijuana community. So, and which meant if your grandma had a joint and she dropped it into a 16-ounce Mountain Dew, your grandma now has a pound of weed. Okay, and now your grandma is going to get prosecuted as if she was a cartel. Okay? Even though she just dropped her joint in a 16-ounce Mountain Dew or something like that, right? So, so then I was like, okay, well, I want to go back and get this over with, but at the same time, I can't just let that linger. So we ended up going to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court decided not to actually hear the case because there was pending legislation. Even though that legislation at that time did not go through, it had to take the next year, but they did end up passing bills that came up with some mathematical formula as to how to convert like edibles into what is usable. But all that came from that roller coaster of that scenario. Now you would think, all right, you know, he get to go back, I get to go back, have my trial, okay? I get to go ahead and say this is, you know, I have my affirmative defense, I get to explain why I have these edibles. You'll think that it'll be over, right? I go back, have my hearing, Section 8 hearing, we have it. We prove prima facie evidence. I'm learning attorney language now. I also went to law school. I'm learning, I proved all three things. I proved that I had a bona fide relationship with the doctor. I proved that it was a reasonable amount. I proved that it was for medical use. The judge even ruled that I met the agreement. And before we can even take this back to trial, they appealed it. The Oakland County appealed the judge's fact that I actually won my Section 8 hearing. They appealed that. So now I had to go back to Court of Appeals, fight it again, and then that went back to Supreme Court, and then that came back down, and then right now I am literally still fighting this Brownie case to this day. And even though that there was new legislation created based upon People versus Carruthers, even though they realized they should not have counted, and I should have had an affirmative defense, and why it comes back to this whole full circle expungement, it's not enough just to say, okay, you can go apply for something, because it's not going to be that simple. It has to automatically come off, because to take someone else through this, like how do you have the resources financially and the wherewithal and the will to keep going through this daunting system? The place in court is not pretty. I mean, it's not like you go in there, there's a great art museum in there. It's a very daunting, depressing place to be, and it really weighs on your spirit. But to this day, even though the Court of Appeals vacated my conviction, the conviction still remains, because every time I try to get it taken off, they play games. Oakland County, play games right now. To this day. Have a felon.
Quick question, Earl. Just a ballpark figure, like what has all of this legal interaction cost financially?
6 figures. 6 figures. Because at this case, it was the Brownie case, and then at the same time, so how? Give you guys some more background real quick. So I mean, when I started to grow and I was doing the anti-inflammatory pill, at the time, if you had overages, you can have I started a delivery company. All right, it's posted something on Weed Map and have delivery. I know about business. I have a good product, a good service, a good atmosphere, and a fair price. I should be able to compete within this environment. And I did very well. It wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of, riffraff, and it's just, so the business picked up pretty well. So I ended up not being able to do all the deliveries. So I ended up I had a credit repair office, so I ended up taking appointments out of the office. But then it didn't go too well, because when I have a credit repair appointment, that's one thing you talk about, credit repair, attorneys, everybody's coming in, and then the next person coming in for cannabis, opening my jar, and then the next person coming in for credit repair, cannabis has a certain smell. So, so I had to separate the two, so I ended up getting another office building in Southfield, on Southfield Road, and 10 Mile. So I had 2 different suites. One was a separate for credit repair. Another one, we operated more of like a medical clinic. We were more of a compassion club or a collective. Okay. I know the time and term, our common name is dispensary. We did not call ourselves a dispensary. We were a collection of caregivers assisting their patients. Because in the law, it said a caregiver can assist a patient and receive compensation. I took the word a, meant a, you're a patient, not the patient. I know I can only grow for the 5, I can only carry for the 5, but who I could assist. You know, if you were a patient and I was a patient and you wanted to pass you a joint, I should be able to sit, and you wanted to give me money for passing you that. As long as you were a patient, I received compensation. That looked pretty simple to me. You know, and that was the business model, how caregivers assisted that way. But Oakland County decided to see it a different way. They sent in an undercover cop who signed our membership agreement as the collective. He had a fake ID. He had a fake cashier's check. And he had a fake medical marijuana card. Now, the reason why he needed all these documents is because you could not pierce this organization or the club unless you were a legitimately paid. Like, we were not just peddling drugs and just, you know, what we were actually literally legitimately trying to operate as a legit cannabis business the way that the law was plainly written to us. So you couldn't join that unless you had all that. So, and for it wasn't like I could call a doctor and verify that this patient went and saw it because of the HIPAA laws and all that jazz. So we verified that you were a true patient if your check was cashed through the state. So if the state cashed your check, they must have verified that your relationship was legit with the doctor. How much more reliable can we get than that? So the officer had a fake cashier's check that showed it was cashed through the state of Michigan. He signed our membership agreement, which is pretty much saying you're only using this for medical use, you're not giving this to kids, partying, this, and that. You're not going to drive under the influence of cannabis, things like that, a membership agreement. He had his ID and he had a fake card. He joins the organization, made a couple transactions. Nothing, no, it wasn't like 30 pounds, something like that. He got a gram here, got an eighth here, had a chocolate milk at the time. He was making chocolate milk fresh for you, infused with cannabis. Yoo-hoo, got a real high yoo-hoo on that. But yeah, so he made a couple of those buys, and then a month later they raided us. Based upon we were assisting someone outside of our 5 patients. Now remember, I knew that we can grow for 5. You can carry for 5. But their interpretation of a caregiver assisting a patient really meant a caregiver only assisting the patient. I mean, but it didn't say the, it did say A. And I did go to school, and A was not the. There's a big difference. Yeah. So then we had to, fight that case. Now at that time, it's not just me. There's 6 defendants. You have the bud tenders, you have the people working the front desk, we did deliveries. So then we get charged with a criminal enterprise and facing up to 6 different felonies. So both of those cases were going on at the same time. Yes, you asked that question, how much did all that cost? Yes. But at that time, it's just, it wasn't really, it became something that was greater than you, that you had to continue to fight. At some point, someone has to say, no, that's not cool. Let's really fight this. But when you really do that, I mean, it's not like Law and Order. It's not like one day next day you're Supreme Court. Then it's over with and everybody's going home. It's like, no, this is going on for years, and it's still on my record.
And that was
and
8 years
still,
ago?
Yeah. So technically, I never could have had a job the entire time, but good thing I'm a cannabis entrepreneur. Then I need to use my resume.
How long into the process did you realize that you wanted to become an advocate for this cause and start telling your story?
Actually, Margot asked me to speak one time.
I saw you speak one time.
Yeah.
And then after that, I called him to speak all the time.
Yeah,
because this is like actually the short version of Earl's story. If he tells it in complete intricate details, it's like an hour or so. Because there are so many details to the case. But the one thing that resounds about it is that he was operating under the law, and that he still had to go to the Michigan State Supreme Court twice, which most people could not do. Also, in addition to knowing Earl, I know a number of people that are in this particular industry. And I had a panel, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 ago with Earl. And I also had Jamie Lowell. Jamie Lowell is credited with being the first Compassion Club provisioning center, dispensary, whatever you want to call it, in the state of Michigan. And he was open for quite some time and, just lived his life pretty normal, was an advocate, totally public. And Earl was the first African-American person to own a dispensary in the state of Michigan. and he had to go to the Michigan State Supreme Court twice, won at the Michigan State Supreme Court twice, and 8 years later is still, under that case. So, just the disparity in that alone. Earl is not the typical guy that you pulled over. Most people would not be able to spend six figures, and I think it's still way underestimating because you didn't get into your asset forfeitures and all those types of things that happen. Yes. So under asset forfeiture, if I say that you're guilty of a crime, I'm allowed to take your personal possessions, and then even if you are found not guilty, now you have to prove that your items are not guilty, which are inanimate objects. And you lost 2 houses and several cars underneath that as well, on top of his legal fees. So I mean that would literally bury most people.
Yeah.
That just gets exponential real quick.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
How do you, how do you think it would have been handled if you were not a person of color? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, I personally have tried to never use the race card per se.
Right.
But I'm still not gonna be naive
Right.
to the fact. But I am also aware that there are plenty of, we can call ourselves victims per se, of this Oakland County and Bill Shuey that were, plenty of people are white as well. So I mean, I guess to answer that question, maybe I would have got better food in jail. It's a different commissary options. But no, I do think, there is a difference. I think it does come down to resources.
Right.
And more 9 times out of 10, people of color don't have those resources
Right.
or those connections that someone else may have. But I do think at this point, though, it was just Canada was just, oh my God, leave, you're just, that's an error. So, yeah.
So, a little more about National Expungement Week. We are hosting 5 events this week. National Expungement Week this year runs September 21st to the 28th. We chose this specific week because it aligns with National Voter Registration Day, which is tomorrow, the 24th. We are hosting 43 events throughout the United States, as far away as Hawaii. I am personally hosting 5 events in the state of Michigan. We had one this past Saturday at the Detroit Recovery House. We're having a legislative discussion here. I have another expungement fair happening immediately after this in Lansing. I give testimony tomorrow on new legislation that is coming out around expungement tomorrow. I have another expungement fair tomorrow in Pontiac, and then I have a final expungement fair with the City of Detroit's Clean Slate Project on Saturday. So it's a very grassroots effort. Last year, when the 5 of us started, we had no budget, no idea, and it really was more impactful than any of us were prepared for. It got an insane amount of press, which we weren't quite prepared for. It ended up in Forbes. So after that, this year, we've had more interest and more elevation of the conversation and sponsorship as well. We have also teamed with Rock the Vote and Code for America. Code for America has a software called Expunge My Record, and essentially what that software does is you code this particular software to clear the record of any person that has a particular conviction that falls under that category on a specific date. So San Francisco did this, and they cleared all the marijuana records. 8,000 records cleared with the flip of a switch. It is extremely, extremely important that when policy is created, you implement technology like Code for America, because the difference between the two is if I create a set of policy that does not automatically expunge people's records, then 6 to 10% of people will actually get the expungement. Whereas if I create a policy that includes automatic expungement, then 100% of the people are automatically covered. And the only thing that you have to truly be concerned about is how do I notify the people that their records were cleared. It's not an extremely expensive software. For a city like Dorchester, Massachusetts, which is roughly 87,000 people, the cost of the software was $15,000. So it is a very low bar. It is extremely affordable by municipality, and it is extremely important that as we create policy, we implement technology so that people don't have to navigate the legal system on their own.
That's amazing.
Yes.
I want to know what National Expungement can do outside of this 1 week. Like if I come to you later with people that I found from Oakland Community College who might need help because they've been denied loans because of their conviction.
That is true. You can and will also be denied loans. I do have some legal framework in place to possibly get someone's record expunged. It's better when we combine resources, like the City of Detroit is an excellent way to do it. This past clinic that we had on Saturday, this was my own clinic with my own framework. We were able to service 75 people, give them some wraparound services, financial literacy, career counseling, etc. But when the City of Detroit does it, then 700 people can come and get their records expunged. So it's extremely important that cities also sponsor this and that they incentivize attorneys to do this type of pro bono work. If you are a third-year law student and your supervisor, you are also eligible to do expungements under the advisement of an attorney. So that is another population that we kind of pull from sometimes to do this. This particular year, it got more notoriety because it just happened to align with the state of Michigan is introducing some new legislation tomorrow morning that would extend the boundaries of expungement. So right now in the state of Michigan, in order to qualify for expungement, you're allowed to have one felony, more than 5 years old, and no more than 2 misdemeanors. Now, when it comes to felony convictions, you can get charged with more than one thing at the first time you come into police contact. If that were to have happened to you before, you would never be eligible for an expungement because it's a one felony clause and it's pretty strict. There are some things that lie outside the boundaries of expungement, traffic tickets being one, criminal sexual conduct 1, 2, and 3, some forms of battery and or abuse.
Traffic.
And traffic was another one. There are a few things, DUIs don't come off as well, operating under the influence, but there are a number of other charges that can be expunged. And they're essentially expanding that boundary. So now you need to have 5 years. They're reducing that to 3 years. And also they're doing a number of other things that are extending the number of misdemeanors and felonies you could potentially have. So tomorrow I will go and give testimony surrounding that in support for new legislation.
Amazing.
Yes.
I'm excited to hear that.
What about if you have a felony and then they throw all the other charges on you, right? What about all those that are collateral to the original?
Right now, I do not believe that you will be eligible for expungement if you have multiple misdemeanors and or felonies. There are some special circumstances. We had Judge Deborah Thomas from 36th District Court, who's an absolute gift, at our clinic on Saturday, and she spoke for about 45 or 50 minutes, giving you all the different scenarios under which you may still be eligible, depending on how long ago you committed the crime, have you been an upstanding citizen. There are special clauses and reasons when a judge can take under advisement who you are as a person right now today.
That's why they throw all those multiple on you.
Yes, because they know right at the interim that this will be something that will.
Yeah, they plan ahead for all that.
Yes.
Just take your life away.
A lot of times people get caught up into that system and they stay in the revolving door.
Yes.
And it does make it harder to get those extra charges, any of the other problems that you might run into. Definitely put a hurdle in your way of getting anything expunged. And again,
And they know that too.
it's denying people their livelihoods,
Yes.
any progress in society. Like I said, I'm really thankful for the opportunity I got because unlike a lot of people, I was able to get past that. I couldn't get hired into the company that I worked for 13 years tomorrow. I couldn't go to a temporary service and get a job at the factory doing the job that I did for 10 years.
Yes.
So, there's a lot to gain, I think, from expanding expungement, being more inclusive, making it easier. Because again, we have to keep this in mind. It was not long ago that these felonies fell off of your record anyhow. It automatically happened after a 7-year period. I don't know if anybody else is old enough to remember that. I feel kind of silly, but here we are, right? Here we are. We need to be doing that because we still have, and I guarantee you, with the passage of Prop 1, they're going to be looking for new ways to create the money coming in. I don't want to say all cops, but the bad cops are going to keep doing what they're doing, and they're just going to find new ways to get it done. There may be new victims. I don't know that, but I do know that more people are still being arrested. For-profit prisons are still a thing. They are still making a ton of money, and they aren't going to give up. So I think it's really important that we have forums like this, that we have groups like your guys. I'm so thankful that you girls are doing this.
Thank you.
The awareness needs to be raised. The education has to be there. Because again, I think a lot of people might look at a guy like Earl and expect something like that because of the societal conditioning we've got. But then, and probably looking at a guy like me too, I guess I'm a bad example.
We both look good.
Hey, I agree. But at any rate, I guess my point is that there's a lot of people who wouldn't expect a wealthy, well-to-do white guy to have this kind of a problem.
Yeah.
And then we are almost forced into the positions of becoming entrepreneurs because we're unemployable.
Yes. In my expungement efforts, I always like to provide wraparound services, like just like a person having a fresh start. So you got your record clean, and maybe you can get a new resume, or learn a little bit about financial literacy. But this year was different. I had an overwhelming request for housing, and I was not prepared for that. And so I went to Detroit Recovery House where we were hosting, and I said, I need housing resources, and he said, so do I. So like even the resources need resources. If you have a felony conviction that is not a protected class, so I as a landlord do not have to allow rent to you. If you were to, just like with student loans, if this was any form of subsidized housing, you are not eligible for this. So I have handicapped you in your ability to earn a livelihood. I have handicapped you in your ability to have a place to live. I have handicapped you in your ability to apply for student loans. And all those things together create a perfect storm for so many people. And it's important that we do things to kind of stand in the gap of that. So.
The work you're doing is amazing. I'm so happy to hear from you guys. And Earl, I want to know what organizations like us can do to help you and spread your story. This is something you've been battling for 8 years and it's still on your record. I don't know how something like that can be possible, but here you are.
I mean, we could do a brownie sale.
Can you make edible pound cake? Is that a
Not medicated brownie sale. But I think right now it's for me it's not a woe is me. It's kind of more shedding light on what has always been there, and I mean really paying attention to who we put in leadership. He's here around, sorry, Joel. I mean, having someone like that here who's actually listening, and you can see that right now he's a state rep, but sooner or later he could be U.S. Senator. Sooner or later. But it's paying attention to that type of leadership and putting support behind him. Because we can sit here and talk to a blue in the face too, then we're going to walk out and say, okay, what change happened? But it's us being consciously as to putting people in place. And unfortunately, some of these people just got to die off. I mean, they just got to die. And then
one of them did already. No.
And then other our young leaders are going to come in place, and they And he may not have heard of cannabis in this scenario before, but now it's caught into his consciousness, and now he's aware of it. And then now when he's making policies in that same scenario, so I think keep on events like this, keep bringing future leaderships together, just to have a conversation, so it's aware. I think right now, no one really gives a shit until it happens to you, or your daughter, or your dad, or your son. And then I was like, oh shit, I guess I should have paid attention to who I voted for when it came from prosecutor. Maybe I should have paid attention to who the state rep was.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, those things do matter. I think these events are making it, you know, I mean, I didn't really vote before all that. I didn't vote at all, actually. I did not vote at all. But then that happened, and it made me more aware of why I should vote. Because I say it doesn't affect me, whatever, but it does, especially locally. So I think things like this, and being able to share your story, and get new leaders. So when other people die, get new people.
Keep plugging. Thank you. I think that's it. I know. You guys have any more questions?
Thank you guys for speaking. Did we have any questions? Anything else you guys would like to say?
No, just thank you, ladies. This is really important. Like Earl said, you know, that you guys are aware, and you can spread that awareness to other people about the importance of voting and the importance of prosecutor accountability, and that all these things are completely and totally connected. Like policy affects people in so many ways. It's very, very important.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
To the panel. So when it comes to these multi-million and sometimes billion-dollar cannabis operations that are operating on a multi-state level and sometimes on an intercontinental level, being from the grassroots market in California since 2008, what are these companies doing to aid in national expungement?
Well, it depends on the company. So we are sponsored this year. So our primary sponsor is Canopy Growth, which is a very well-known international company. Canopy Growth is slightly different because they're Canadian. In my experience, the Canadian companies are much more forthcoming when it comes to social equity. It's not like an arm wrestling kind of thing where we want you to just put our logo all over everything and we'll do this. Nationally, in addition to Canopy Growth, we have Houseplant, which is Seth Rogen's brand, which is in Canada as well. Kaliva is another one of our sponsors. Those are our sponsors from the cannabis community. Locally in the state of Michigan, thus far, I have had sponsorship from Own With Medicine in Ann Arbor, from Sticky Ipsy in Ypsilanti, and also Green Genie in Detroit.
Wonderful. It's good to hear companies are helping with this because I've seen, during my time in California, being a cultivator, I've seen a lot of people essentially go to prison, or worse yet, they used to be, you know, lead growers or own their own grows, and they're working at grocery stores now.
Yes.
So the faster national expungement moves along, the better off the entirety of the national and international cannabis economy will be.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. And I would say just on that, not enough. And there are some. Yeah, you talked about over 500 different licenses. By
Yes,
now.
3 sponsorships.
And you can count on her hand, you know, how many people are doing that. And it's just shedding light on the whole, you know, dog-eat-dog-eat world, or that selfishness. I mean, it's more, I believe it was during the Civil Rights Movement, they had a mission. It was Operation Breakbacks. With the king, it was kind of like, if they didn't respect your, if they did not respect your dollar, do not bother. And they did that for, I think it was like Wonder Bread. They had like boycotting Coke and Wonder Bread, and then banking came along because people came together as a community and did not support these businesses that did not respect their dollar. And I believe until we do that same scenario here, to where people who consume cannabis, if they don't respect your dollars, meaning if they're not giving back to and supporting the Expungement Week, or helping people join the board who are women as well, or helping making sure that you have fair employment practices, or doing something that's giving back to the community. Until they have a pressure to actually do that, they're not going to do it. But it has to come from us. I don't think we're going to sit here and be like, pie in the sky, a guy's going to come on with some white horse coming from the sky with red eyes beaming, and be like, boom, these are the corporations. I don't think until we come together and say, look, I'm not going here to support them, and then their bottom lines hit, now they're figuring out, how can I all of a sudden get my bottom line up? Well, get your bottom line up, support the community.
Exactly. Or you can just take
Support but the man from the fifth floor.
Yes.
exactly, because somebody
You got the
who's
plug.
literally, I've hidden bushes from black helicopters before.
Yeah.
And what happened to you, it could have happened to me. I just heard the helicopters coming before they occurred, and luckily I can talk about this because the statute of limitations has happened between 7 and 10 to 11 years ago. So it's all fine for public record. But to see so many of the grassroots industry and the people go through the problems that we've been through for, what, a decade, 4 decades?
Yeah.
Because the cannabis industry is nothing new. And then to see this green run and everything going on, these companies do need to partake in more national expansion. So thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Thank you so much.
Okay, I think that's the end of our panel today.
Thank you. ladies.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yes.